trying to get a little bit better. So welcome everyone and your newcomers. Last week, we talked about different stitches that we could use to make specific embroideries. Now, I kind of put a challenge out there for everyone. Of course, I always see some people show up and they're like, oh, I didn't do my stitches. I can tell you, I did not do the stitches because I've had one too many things to do this week. But I thought I would go through a few things on how to get to where you're going with that. And then we're going to specifically talk about the Tambour Hook, because we're going to be going to that next. That'll be next week's, because I, truth be told, could not find my quilting table. I was like, where the hell did I put that? I thought I put that with the leather and couldn't find it there. I finally found it. So let's see. From last week, I know Erica and Jennifer, you were here. Did you do your signature in stitches? Jennifer, you did. Okay, great. I want you please share and show, because I would love to see and talk about it. Tell us what stitches you used and what made you think about this and how you came up with it.
Okay, so it's not exactly a signature. I more or less worked on this turned into a production, okay?
Wait a second. So everyone, does everyone know, I mean, I know Erica does, but Stephanie, since you're new to our little T group, Jennifer works for NASA. Like NASA, right?
Yes.
That's
not
awesome.
Not masa, like the corn that Mexicans used to make tortillas with. NASA, NASA.
What do you do for them?
I'm the business manager at the Goddard Institute for Space Studies that's here in New York City.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
We reinvented the high heel shoe, which is why I work with aerospace and engineers, right?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, I was like,
yeah. So some of our sourcing material has only really been used by NASA so far. So it's funny, like there's so much materiality that's come from there that can totally be used in different areas. And like as fashion designers, we don't really think about that, but I mean, it's amazing. That's incredible to have these, like this intersection together and you're in there. That's awesome. That's awesome.
I think this is the favorite part. This is my most favorite part about being with all of you, is that every one of you comes from a different experience, and I love to support, share, and live in those moments, because I think that's what a community does for each other, and it's really, I think, fantastical. Really fantastical.
Aw, that's just like my heart is just like, I'm trying not to. I'm like, I'm serious. Like I've got tears like welling up in my eyes. That is like so sweet. Aww.
But you still have an embroidery to show us.
Yes, I do. Okay, I do. Okay, so I have a little story, because again, this turned into a production.
Absolutely.
Over the summer, I have a cabinet of fabric, and they're all like the fabric that I've used, but I resist throwing away, and there are all these different shapes and sizes and all of this kind of thing, because that's just how it goes. And so over the summer, I've been also working on curtains in my house, because I have weird shaped windows that won't fit the standard size. So I took some of the salvage denim that I had left over from making the jeans in your construction class. I had enough left and made a curtain. And then my little brother turned 30 this year. And bless his heart, because of everything that's been going on in the world, he didn't get to have his hoopla celebration. But I still wanted to do something special for him. So I had gotten him some wine, and I was putting together like this care package, and then I wrapped the wine bottles in tissue paper, and I was like, no, this isn't gonna work. So I still had a little bit more of the salvage denim left, and so I decided, you know what, I'm going to make something to wrap these. So they turned into like these napkin placemat things. And so then I wrapped it, and then I put these little the tacking that you taught us to do, like in the very first sessions. I attached these little trinkets that said made with love and this kind of thing. And then I did that. And so now I'm getting ready to do my parents' batch. But now that we're into this embroidery, I was like, okay, so I'm going to do my parents. So then it kind of got a little bit more serious. So I was like, all right, I'm going to pattern this baby. So that I have this like pattern. So now I have this pattern so that I can make these from now on, because when I did his, I just took one of my napkins and did a rub off, but I was like, we're getting serious. So I made a pattern. So the pattern has been made.
Excellent.
And I ordered all of this stuff from like Amazon. So I have all of this now. So I was like, we're going for this. And so then after I did the pattern, I found the fabric that I was going to use, cut my fabric out, did all of that, did my ironing so that when I go to sew, it's going to be so much easier.
Good.
So before I decided to jump into these, I decided, all right, we're going to practice on some of these. So what I've been doing is using, I believe it's not I don't know the precise term of it, but is it the chain? I don't think it's the chain stitch. It's the one that you taught us. It's right here. It's the outline, but it's the one where you go in, but then you come up through the
split
stitch.
stitch. The split stitch.
The split stitch, because
Yes.
I don't know why, for some reason I really like that split stitch. I really like that stitch. So I just went around one flower to practice to see how it was gonna, work out on this one. And then I think on this one, I just did a fill-in. It's kind of hard to see, so I just did like a regular stitch. I don't know if it has a name. But then
But did a stitch that maybe like was right next to each other, so it kind of feels like
yes.
a satin stitch. So you used a satin stitch.
Okay, so I did a satin stitch and what was it? A split stitch?
Split stitch.
Okay, good. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna write those down. So those were the 2 stitches that I did, but I don't feel like it's gonna show up on this one. So of course I have pulled out this thing too. So I'm like, what colors do I? I'm telling you, this is like a production. But then I also want to show you something too. I want to show you guys this. So these were the ladies that I worked with when I was in Belize, because I was like, oh yeah, because I was looking at the Tambour Hook.
Yes.
Because I know you're gonna show the Tambour Hook. And so this is just muslin that they did, and then they drew on this, and then they made these bags. So they called it the pencha, but I think it was actually a punch needle that they're using. But it reminded me of that, and so I just wanted to show that to you. And then this one is a tortilla holder, but this is actually like the embroidery, like straight up cross stitch type thing.
Those are great. The bag itself, so when if you look at the back side of the bag, the inside, I'm just curious. Okay, yes. So yes, that would actually be a product of a punch needle in the way that they're doing it. That's fantastic. I actually think the back is just as beautiful as the front. There's something really, I think there's something always great and magical about the of doing something that's on the inside.
I agree. That's to me some of the best part, thinking about, like, I know outside of like embroidery, but like also in garments, when they tend to be like the simplest garments, but then when you go on the inside, you just see this wonderful, fantastic world of all the construction.
So someone who, one of our tea ladies, Joy Mao, who was in my tailoring class, I want to say 2 semesters in the fall. She actually has done a couple of different things. She's put together some stuff, and her construction is really quite beautiful. And I remember that when this last turnaround, she made a handmade suit for someone, and actually used one of the just a normal basting stitch, and wrote her name as on the back as part of her signature. And I thought it was really brilliant, because it's from a very simple aspect, but gives a very strong identity towards something that is made with care and also with love. And I think at the end of the day, when we look at what we're wearing, are we wearing things that have purpose, or are we wearing things that are just to make sure we're not naked? I mean, I'm making sure I'm not naked. No one wants to see that, especially in my neighborhood. So, all right. Well, that's great, Jennifer. I can't wait to see what else you do with that. The split stitch is actually great. Is so wonderful for all those things, especially when you're doing for the outlining, because I do think that it does give such a nice outline look that it allows you to kind of think, oh, hey, I can do this. And then when you apply a stitch on top of it, then it will also work. So I did not work on, I didn't get there, but I am going to show you a way of transferring, if you were to take a signature or even your logo for what you're going to do, to an idea of muslin, if you wanted to create it by hand, and then move it forward. And then we'll discuss a few interesting aspects of the Tambour Hook, because it is quite interesting. We will watch a video of a woman who talks about it. And then next week, when I actually find the pieces to my table, I'll set a camera up on top and a camera up underneath, so you can see how it's moving at the exact same time and at the exact same rate. So let me move over here to camera numero uno. Always the last image that I've worked with. So, you know, when we think about how we're going to work in the future and stuff, you know, when we're making the stitches and whatnot, it is nice to be able to see everything that we're doing. And that really does make a big difference in how we're doing it. So how we translate different designs into what we're doing, it can be just about as easy as copying something else and making sure that copy makes it over to what you're doing. Here, today I'm gonna work with two different materials. One, I will work with a little bit of organza because of course you can see through it and it does make it a little bit easier in that aspect. The other one, of course, that I'm gonna stick with my normal 12 fabric, which is just basically a medium series. And I have it started there, but first and foremost, so let's take a design idea, and I'm just gonna use my signature since I usually get it doesn't really look like a signature, but I guess if it is your signature, it works. So I would, to translate this, I'm going to just use a blank piece of paper and I'm going to try to imagine where I would put this and the size that I'm going to make it. So first things first, I'm gonna just grab a pencil and kind of trace around so I know that I can't get any bigger than what I'm working with here. Of course, if I could find a fucking pencil that has lead in it. All right, here we go. I haven't changed, by the way. My mouth is still terrible. Okay, so I have the circle. I know exactly where I'm at for this, and I want to be able to get in, decide how I'm going to put this, but this is going to be kind of like, I can't pass this border because that's how big my hoop is going to be. So I'm going to use a marker. I would choose definitely a darker marker and make sure that you get a nice, that it's, you know, nice and saturated, or that it's working well and that you can actually see with it. So make sure that it's nice and moist to work with. But here I'm going to put in my signature, and I'm going to use kind of like more of like the slanted tip. Part of the reason why I do this is because when we go to actually make a signature, or we're doing something, when we do right with this, it just kind of happens to be that you get a different, you know, you get different ideas going around the entire thing. You have both a thick part to what you're doing and a thin part, which I think can add to the mystery of your own signature or the brand name that you're working on. So here is my simple circle, and I'm just going to sign it. And yes, I know it kind of looks like a heart, but it's not really a heart. And my mom always says, she's like, you know, you should have just been a doctor. No one can tell what your name is from that because it looks like a squiggle line. And I was like, true. This is very true, mother. So I'm going to hoop some clean muslin. So move this out of the way. And here, just so everyone gets a little bit familiar with it, I have these little hoops that I kind of love, and they're great. They were super cheap. I'm gonna make sure that it's a little bit on the tight side. So you kind of wanna make sure when you're adding the fabric to the hoop that there's just a little bit of give in it, so that you can get the fabric out, because you want it to fit nice and snug. Lay the fabric over the edges of the hoop, and then take the inner circle and then just press down nice and firm. If the hoop is nice and tight, then you won't have to pull a lot of the fabric. But if it's not, then it's going to present just a tiny bit of a challenge when you go to do this. So I'm just stretching the fabric so it's nice and clear over here, and then making sure I'm holding it, just twisting the screw so it makes it just a bit tighter. And as tight as it will go while holding the fabric this way, when you're working with it, there's kind of like a little bit of a bounce. You can see that there's just a nice tight bounce to it. So I have my signature over here, making sure that I have a nice, good amount of light because I want to be able to see through the muslin. And I'm going to use the same pencil that I was using earlier, but you can see I can place the hoop over what I'm working on, and I can kind of trace the outline of the shape of my signature that has kind of come. Now, what's great about this is I can choose whichever stitch that I want to work with in these areas. Whether I want it to be thin, whether I want it to be fat. But it kind of gives me an idea. And very, very simple shading. Here, let me just turn the page so it's white because it'll give you a better background. You can kind of see very, very, very lightly that you can just fill this in with a little bit of pencil because we're going to be going over this anyway, so it won't really matter. And then you can decide the stitches that you're going to do with it. And I think why I like this method is because it does allow for that kind of odd imperfectness. We each sign differently, and I don't think everyone signs exactly the same. Although I will tell you, my mother has one of the most amazing signatures, and she has beautiful cursive, whereas my writing is absolutely horrific. And every time I see it, it always looks the same. So as a child, which I would never admit to her, I finally did at one point. I used to learn how to copy her name so that if I got in trouble, which wasn't often, but it did happen, I would be able to kind of replicate her signature because she had specific loops that she always did. And so, but you can, it kind of translates to this very easily. You can see that I've worked over here, and you can see that light impression of how I'm going to actually put on my embroidery for this particular signature. So I'm going to move this over. And come up here just a pinch. And I've got my black thread, of course. I figure this is probably the one thing that's most synonymous with me is the color black, since that's the only color I generally wear. And I'm just going to start with my with the first one inside, because translating it is, of course, going to be half of the problem. Now, when we do things, when you're translating stuff, especially when you're working on something that you don't want to see, like maybe a knot on the back side, or you're just unsure of at the moment how you're going to finish, you can actually hold the thread in place. And I'm going to show you really quickly how to do that without giving any kind of craziness to it. You can take a pin and just put a pin over here kind of in an area of the embroidery, or it could even be off of the embroidery over here in the excess of the side. And then you're going to pull just a tiny bit amount so that you have a bit of a tail, enough to work with, so that you're going through it. And we're just going to slip it up underneath the head of the pin. And then we're going to figure 8 right up underneath the back. This will help hold it, and we're going to repeat that process one more time. Figure 8 at the top, so that it looks like we're almost kind of making a knot, but we're not really making a knot. We're just having it in place so that we can hold it, and it's not going to move. This prevents having to create an extra knot that's on the back side, especially if you're doing something that you're giving to someone and it's only one layer. So I'm just going to quickly go back through one more time as just a holding pattern, just over here at the end. So I've done a figure 8 through and through on both sides to create that. And now when I pull the thread over here, it should be nice and tight. Should I do it one more time so you guys can see it? Okay. So I've entered the thread through the actual hoop itself on this side, and I'm just going to stick that in for right now. If you don't want to make a knot, or you feel like the knot is just not appropriate to what you're doing, like Jennifer, you had your design. If you wanted to leave it so that it was kind of not so bulky on the back side, especially when it might be seen, we can easily keep a tail in on the back side, and we're going to take a pin right where we're at and stick it into the hoop, or stick it into the fabric, not into the hoop, but in the hooped fabric. And we're going to draw a figure 8 with the thread around it. So I'm first going to go around the head and then up underneath the bottom part of the pin. And then same difference, we're going to go back around the head of the pin, this time in that figure 8 manner. And we're going to go back around the bottom of the pin in the opposite direction. This will help us give a little bit of tension so that the thread's not going to be moving a whole lot. And when you go to this side, it should say nice and in place. This way you can keep the thread slightly loose and you don't have to make that ugly knot that's on the bottom of your hoop itself, all right? And then you can decide, because I think once you get into the practice of the stitch, of course, here we're gonna, I'm gonna start on the back side with my actual stitching itself. I think I might have got a little excited there. Punch that right back through. Here we go, much better. When we start that initial stitch, then I can come back here and make sure that it's nice and tight, and I can enter through, and as you did on yours, Jennifer, I can do that, start that split stitch so that it's coming up right through the end, and it starts my entire process, and it kind of creates its own little knot back here on the back side. So then I don't have to worry about having a big bulb right there. This starts the first knot. And if you need to secure it, just go back in one more time. Right there at the edge, because this will help knot it even more. And that first, and just go back through and split the absolutely the first one. This will help give it a little bit more of that knotted feeling. So here, I have a little bit of thickness right there, which is okay. But on the back side, I can actually clip this stitch right here and get rid of the tail of the thread, so it's no longer needed or necessary. And then of course I can go along with following my signature and creating the rest of the actual visual. And I think what's nice is you can use just about you can use all of the different stitches that we use, but as you're going through this and manipulating them, it starts to just kind of take its own form. I think when I get to the thicker parts, I can actually choose to do I can do this, because this will be my kind of like beginning outline, and then I can do a satin stitch on top of it to give it a little bit more vim, or I can just do double chain stitches, which will help to give it a little bit more breadth. But that's at least a great way of starting, and it puts you right into the realm of what you're doing, and you end up having a nice knot. You have no knot here in the back, which makes it easy. I will finish this for next week so that we can look at what I did, and then we can also see maybe another example of what either you did or what anybody else had put together. But that kind of helps put a little bit into perspective of what you're doing as far as working with transferring a signature from paper to muslin and doing the lightest way known possible so that it still will work in a very good hypothetical way. All right. Fun, fun, fun. Now, let's have a quick intro to what the timbre is going to be like and how it's going to move. I started playing with this just a little bit, of course today of all days, just because I've been busy. But it's something that I actually do like, but it's a manner of moving it in a specific direction that really will make a difference on how it works. So I guess a bigger question is, Jennifer, did you buy a Tambour Hook?
I did not get a Tambour Hook. I wanted to watch and see because there were, and another thing is there were a few different ones. There was the one that had the needle, and then I believe you also showed one that had a claw.
Right.
And so I kind of wanted to just
Okay,
watch.
I am going to do my due diligence, and I will actually post the link for Amazon so that you can decide which one you want to use. I'm going to work with the Tambour Hook first, since it is the most difficult, and the other one is slightly easier kind of to work with in general. But I thought what would be fun is if we watched a quick video that helped explain this and why it works a specific way, because it's really unique, and truth be told, it's the hierarchy of how all embroidery is done. Let's see. All right. Let me just populate that.
The basic stitch in tambour embroidery is the chain stitch. And
okay, hang on. Let me just share my screen. Okay, let's see. It takes a little configuring to get this done. All right.
to create it, we use a little hook called a tambour hook. And notice that the opening of the hook and the knob on the handle are on the same side. Tambour embroidery can be used to make chain stitch
Okay,
lines.
so I'm going to go back and really quickly pause right there.
The hook and the knob.
This is the most important thing to remember, is that the little screw over here is absolutely paramount important to make sure that it's on the same side, or at least facing in the same position as the hook itself, because there's a specific motion to it and how it's going to work. But it really is quite beautiful, and you can see a small example there that she's done, but it really is quite lovely.
On the same side. Tambour embroidery can be used to make chain stitch lines, and it can also be effectively used for chain stitch fillings. You can use practically any type of thread with tambour embroidery on practically any type of fabric. So today we're going to look just at the basic stitch used in tambour embroidery, the chain stitch. And I've anchored my thread off here to the side, but you can check the website for other ways to start your thread. And I'm going to be stitching from left to right. So the knob on my tambour hook and the opening are facing down the line in the direction that I'll be stitching. When you enter the fabric with the tambour hook, you always want to go straight up and down vertically. Don't go in at an angle or out at an angle, because you'll snag the fabric. So go straight down into the fabric to take your first stitch. take the thread from the back all the way around the needle, and then turn the needle backwards so that it's facing now in the opposite direction, and the knob will show you where it's going.
I love the furrowed
Pull through
look,
and exert
Jennifer,
a
just
little pressure on
FYI.
the back of the hook. The thread's going to catch in the hook, and as you pull through, ease up on the tension of the thread so that you can move forward for your next stitch. So straight down into the fabric, take the thread all the way around in a complete circle, turn the hook backwards, catch the thread on the hook, pull straight up and through, ease up the tension, and move forward, turning the hook back down the line. So the thread goes all the way around, and then you turn the hook, pull up and catch the thread, and you can really feel the thread catch in the hook. So you want to make sure you feel that. Exert a little pressure on the back of the hook as you pull through, ease up the tension, turn the hook forward down your line.
Okay, now what she's not explaining here, and her fabric is much easier because there's lots of holes in it, is that when you do this, as you place the chain, of course, on the top, remember we're working, this is actually on the back side of the fabric. So this is all done really more of where what you're looking at is on the downside, is on the underside of what you're actually doing. What she's not mentioning, because this fabric is quite holey, which is probably a good thing, is that when you turn the hook to actually move it in the fabric, you have to apply a little bit of pressure coming away from the actual stitch. Otherwise, you will snag the fabric. So notice when she's doing this, watch her turn here.
And then
so she
back
wraps
into the fabric for the next stitch.
She turns
So
it.
here we are.
Now right here is where it has to, you have to have a little bit of pressure going toward in the direction that you're going. Otherwise, your hook will actually pick up the fabric.
Through, there's the thread catching, comes up through the stitch, and then you turn forward for the next stitch. Now we're going to zoom in a little bit and slow the film down so that you can really see the stitch in the work.
See, I feel like I need to get the net, because
So
the net would be the
needle is
easiest one to do,
pointing, and the
as you
knob,
can't catch
the
it.
needle and the knob pointing down the line. I'm taking the thread all the way around from the back in a complete circle. And now I'm turning the hook backwards so the knob is pointing in the opposite direction and pulling, and you can see the thread catch in the hook. Exert a little pressure on the back of the hook.
That's right
so that
there.
It's easy to pull the hook through the fabric. Ease up the tension on the thread as you pull the stitch through the fabric. Turn the hook back forward so that it points down the line in the direction you're stitching. And then move forward and down into the fabric for the next stitch. And
It's kind of like the most complicated way of actually sewing without, and you're not actually sewing. So it's very interesting. I think it's one of those, you know, I've watched this a couple of times. I actually learned on a different, on something different. So it's very interesting to see this and how in reaction to.
then the thread comes all the way around the hook.
But I'm going to post this in as well so people can kind of get used to it and kind of have an idea.
So it's facing the opposite direction, pulls up, catches the thread, and pulls it straight through the stitch. Ease up the tension on the thread and move forward for the next stitch.
And she's doing it in very, very slow motion.
With a little bit of practice, you can pick up speed and accuracy with the Tambour Hook, and you can create the chain stitch a lot faster and cover a lot more area in a lot less time with the Tambour Hook. So that's Tambour embroidery. For more tips and techniques on hand embroidery, stop by and visit me at Needle and Thread.
It's actually a great, great website. I think she's a lot of fun. She talks through quite a few things. and it's kind of fantastic. So we will definitely divide more into that. I have started, and I did it through muslin since I didn't have anything else over here, and so I have it suspended, which doesn't really kind of work 100%. It does for the moment, but you know, the hard thing right now is to actually be able to pick up what you're doing. You know, whenever you leave the thread, always try to make sure that you leave just a little bit left, but you're always working with a normal thread or some kind of a tail to take it and turn it back into the actual fabric and do the exact same thing that she had talked about, which is what what we will explore more next week, and hopefully everyone will have a chance to pick up that timbre and really just kind of like decide for themselves if this is something that's for them and if it's not for us. See, so you need something to be able to hold everything in place, because otherwise it just kind of suspension, it will work, but overall it won't. So something that I think will be fun, and who knows, you may become a timbre specialist with this, because it is there is a skill to it, and I have noticed that there is a specific motion with holding it and moving it, and you get just kind of like the same way that you learned how to do circles or curves. It will just come with time, but I do still love a good needle and thread because I think it's a lot of fun.
I hear ya. I do. And I feel like even though it does require some patience, and sometimes I do get a little bit frustrated with it, once you find the rhythm, there's something zen-like about it. It's just, yeah.
There is.
And there hasn't like a machine that you're trying to deal with either. I don't know. I think I was thinking about that the other night. I was like, I feel like I have more control over this, like when I was doing this or the embroidery, than when I'm sitting at the machine, because there's, it's a machine.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that's kind of all we have. I'm just going to stop the recording because then we can either chat or whatnot. But till next week,